When doomsday arrived, I was lucky enough to be selected for a shelter slot. My mother-in-law and husband suddenly developed a saint complex and insisted on bringing along the neighbor mother and son. When we got there, I submitted the documents and only wrote down my daughter's name. They panicked and said they were all together. I looked at the boy behind my husband, who looked just like him, and shook my head. I don't know them. The meteor shower will breach the atmosphere in 9 days, 14 hours, 23 minutes, and 11 seconds. Please proceed to the shelter and register as soon as possible. Messages kept refreshing on my phone, and I stared at the screen for a long while before finally coming back to my senses. I had been reborn after being tortured to death. I returned to the day I received the evacuation notice. In my previous life, I was lucky enough to draw a spot for evacuation and could bring up to 3 relatives to the shelter. As it happened, during our discussion, our neighbor Fuya, who had come over for a visit, accidentally overheard us and us to take her and her son with us. Along the way, Shang-Chi and I argued nonstop. I think it's too cruel to wait until we get there and then say there are no spots left. It would be better to tell Fuya early. Yet, he kept saying to wait until the time came later. Shang-Chi used every possible means to force me to hand over the shelter password. And that was when I realized they were the real family. Mom, what's wrong? The soft little body rushed into my arms, and as I felt the living warmth of my child in my embrace, my eyes instantly turned red. In my previous life, to force me to reveal the shelter password, they brutally hacked off my daughter's arm right in front of me. It was Shang-Chi who personally did it, facing his own daughter's cries and screams. He didn't even blink. I clenched my molars tightly, forcing myself to suppress the urge to immediately go cut Shang-Chi down. And it took a while before I finally spoke. Ching-Ching, my baby, be good. My voice was a little choked up. Ching-Ching, not understanding, raised her hand to touch my face. Mommy, don't cry. Mommy isn't crying. Mommy just feels so happy to see Ching-Ching. After coaxing my daughter for a while, I quickly started making preparations. We can't afford to fall out with Shang-Chi right away. In the apocalypse, everyone is in danger, and evil gets amplified endlessly. Only by keeping them under control can my daughter and I safely rendezvous with the people at the shelter. I first went to the deserted electronics market and got a phone, then put in a temporary SIM card. Then I changed the temporary card's name to the shelter center. Then I copied the emergency SMS I had received, changed some important information, and sent it back to myself. There was no way to verify whether this kind of message was real or fake, so I wasn't afraid of Shang-Chi finding out. Then I washed my face and practiced my expressions and tone in front of the mirror for a long time before I finally called Shang-Chi. Hubby, where are you? Where else could he be? At the company, of course. We're all about to lose our lives. And Shang-Chi still runs to the company every day. I didn't understand it before. He said he wanted to find a chance to get to the shelter. Later, Freya told me before I died that Shang-Chi and his mother-in-law, Li Wansha, often stayed with their mother and son after the apocalypse arrived. They felt that since he was about to die, the family should stay together and cherish their last moments. The reason they didn't abandon me immediately was that I had a wide network of contacts. If I managed to find a way to get to the shelter, it would have been a loss greater than the gain. She also said that every time I called Shang-Chi, he had the phone on speakerphone. She just nestled in Shang-Chi's arms and listened as he brushed me off. This time, it's my turn to give them all the brush off. Honey, I need to tell you something. You have to promise not to get excited and don't let anyone else see it. The implication was all too obvious. Shang-Chi's breathing grew rapid. You got the spot. On the other end, no one knew whether it was Li Wansha or Fuya, but an excited voice couldn't help blurting out. Shang-Chi, feeling guilty, hurriedly covered it up with a cough. I pretended not to hear and said, "Keep your voice down." Shang-Chi lowered his voice as I had suggested. How many spots? A total of 6. 6. Honey, listen to me. Even though there are 2 extra, we still can't make a fuss about it. Of course. What I mean is there aren't really any relatives left on my side or yours. So why not invite Sister Fu from upstairs? What do you want her to do? Zhang Qi asked very cautiously. That spot would sell for quite a bit of money, wouldn't it? At a time like this, what good is money? I think Sister Fu has been really good to our mom, and it's not easy for her to raise an older child by herself. In fact, there had long been signs of this. Fu Ye was especially close to Li Wansha, and Li Wansha often went to Fu Ye's house to help out, saying it wasn't easy for her to raise a child alone. It went way beyond a normal, neighborly relationship. It was just that their acting was too good, and they fooled me. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Zhang Qi probably thought he had hidden it well enough, and that there was no way I could have noticed anything. So, he said, "Okay, hooked." I curved my lips. "Then I'll go upstairs and tell Sister Fu right now." "Don't." Zhang Qi sounded flustered, then forced himself to stay calm. "Let's wait until tonight to discuss this with Mom first." I was only trying to scare him. I had no intention of actually going up. "All right, let's see whether Mom has anyone she wants to take with us." Zhang Qi and his mother came back one after the other very quickly and immediately came to me to confirm it. Looking at Zhang Qi, who looked so upright and proper, I thought of the vicious expression he had when he came at my daughter with a knife, and I forced myself to calm down for a long time. Fortunately, securing an evacuation spot was a major matter, and my odd behavior didn't arouse any suspicion from the mother and son. They just kept urging me to quickly show them the evacuation notice. I showed them the fake message along with the evacuation password without holding anything back. The mother and son exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with complicated emotions. When I showed them the news about the shelter in my previous life, they had the same inscrutable expressions. Clearly, even though there are 6 spots and they could make sure all of us get into the shelter, they still don't plan to let me go. As expected, after Zhang Qi revealed his true colors, he told me that he had always approached me for money. He investigated me early on, learned my preferences, and pretended to be a good man when he appeared before me. Then he bought insurance and prepared to have me die in a long-planned accident. He would then naturally inherit my tens of millions in assets and bring the wronged Fu Ye back to his side using my money to properly raise his son. The onset of the apocalypse disrupted Zhang Qi's plan, but did not end it. Doesn't smoke or drink, cooks and does laundry, and is always home before 10 o'clock at night. These are all labels Zhang Qi put on himself in order to get close to me, but these made him feel like he had no manly dignity. So he resented me. If it weren't for trying to get close to me, he wouldn't have had to be like this. Only by my death could he wash away the humiliation of all these years. But I had already prepared for this. In the evacuation notice, I also wrote that I had to be present in person. Otherwise, the password would be invalid. So even if Zhang Qi wanted to take my life, he could only do it after I entered the shelter, suppressing the irritation in his heart. He said, "Then, I'll go upstairs and tell Fu Ye." I pretended not to understand. "Didn't you say you wanted to discuss it with Mom first?" Zhang Qi froze for a moment. "I told Mom on the phone, and she said it was fine." I glanced at the phone Li Wansha had left at home without taking it out with her, and smiled. "All right, then, you go find Sister Fu, and Mom and I will stay home and pack things up. I'll go over, too," Li Wansha said. "It's not convenient for her to take care of a child alone. I'll help her pack her things." I sneered inwardly. "So, it's convenient for me to take care of my daughter alone." However, he said, "All right, she didn't want to pack up her things, so if she and Zhang Qi didn't bring any, so be it. Anyway, they were going to die sooner or later. Simply keeping them out of the shelter was not enough to dispel the hatred in my heart. They even took part in the abuse of our mother and daughter. And even Zhang Chainan, who was only 15, was involved. I won't let any one of them off easy, even though Qingqing is by my side. I can't do it myself, but I have plenty of ways to make them pay in blood. The 2 of them didn't come back until midnight. I heard the noise and walked out, clutching my shoulder. "Honey, what's wrong with your shoulder?" Zhang Qi's acting was truly superb. Not a trace of insincerity could be seen. I withdrew my gaze from his face and said flatly, I just twisted myself while packing things a moment ago. I had been thinking of taking turns driving with you on the road, but it looks like that won't work now. In my previous life, not long after we set off, Zhang Qi accidentally sprained his wrist, and I ended up driving for the remaining several hundred kilometers. This time, I struck first because I had never played any tricks on Zhang Qi before. He believed me easily. Why are you so careless? Pretending to be concerned, Zhang Qi furrowed his brow and let his true feelings show. Driving is tiring, and it was obvious they had already worked out how to pin this miserable job on me. Unfortunately, I can't let them have their way, afraid that the neighbors would find out we had shelter spots. We agreed to leave at daybreak, but after waiting in the parking lot for a long time, Fu Ye and her son still didn't show up. In my previous life, it was just like this, and we were so anxious we were at our wits' end. We were terrified that people out early for exercise would notice we couldn't leave. Zhang Qi and Li Wanshan asked me to go upstairs and call everyone, but when Fu Ye and Zhang Chainan came down, they said that boys were still growing and could afford to sleep a little longer. It made it seem like I was the only one unhappy about their being late. Zhang Chainan was just as petty as his grandmother and kept a sullen face toward me the whole time. Not only did they pick on me on the way, they even bullied my daughter while I was driving. So this time, whoever wants to call them can go. I'm not going anyway. My experience from my previous life tells me that no one would think that someone would still get a shelter quota at this time. So even if I ran into a neighbor, it wouldn't bring disaster. Xiao, why don't you go up and call her? Li Wanshan said. I replied to her with the same words she had used in my previous life. Mom, Ainin is still growing. Let him sleep a little longer. We can just wait. Zhang Qi, we can't afford to wait. You should go call them. I remained unmoved. Let the kids sleep a little longer. Seeing this, Li Wanshan had no choice but to go up herself. Half an hour later, the mother and son came down with her. Zhang Chainan clearly hadn't slept enough and was walking at the back with a dark expression. I stepped forward. Oh, I was just saying that Ainin is still growing, so I let him sleep a little longer. How did you come down so quickly? Upon hearing this, Fu Ye gave Li Wansha a reproachful look. From what I knew, Li Wansha probably blamed Fu Ye for their lack of punctuality. The two of them ended up a little unhappy. Seeing that, I acted as if there was nothing more I could say and silently got into the car. Sitting in the last row, Qing Qing was sleeping there, quietly curled up into a little ball. Xia hold Qing Qing and sit in the front and let Ainin keep sleeping in the back. Li Wansha saw that her grandson was unhappy and wanted to do her best to make up for it. Fu Ye said hypocritically, No need. I pretended to get up a little, and when I heard her say that, I sat back down again. Seeing this, Zhang Chainan's face darkened even further. Li Wansha hurriedly urged me, Hurry. Unfortunately, her grandson didn't appreciate it. In a fit of pique, he said, No need, and sat down in the single seat in the middle. The atmosphere grew awkward for a moment. Li Wansha got into the car after him and sat beside Zhang Chainan. She eagerly took out the breakfast she had prepared and handed it to her precious grandson. But he didn't even say thank you. He snatched it away and started eating on his own. And Fu Ye familiarly opened the front passenger door and got in directly at last. Just as she had every time before, she turned her head and asked me, Xia, you won't mind if I sit here, will you? Her expression was half smiling, half not, with her usual disdain in the corners of her eyes and brows. I had long since seen through her. I thought she, as a single mother, couldn't stand seeing our family so happy and complete. I understand now that look was clearly saying that Zhang Qi was her man and I was nothing. We sped along, and before long I saw the blocked highway again. It was about 2 or 3 kilometers from the highway entrance. An abandoned minibus lay across the middle of the road with 5 or 6 cars ahead of it that had been nearly wrecked by the violent collision. We can't get through. The sudden situation on the road to survival caused panic to spread quickly throughout the car. Zhang Chainan, like everyone else, was clearly very uneasy. But teenage boys always have a strange sense of pride. He didn't want anyone to see how scared he was. So he turned his fear into complaints. Is all you've got in your heads. You just ran out without even figuring out the traffic situation. In my past life, I was the one driving and I was the one getting cursed at. Fu Ye and Li Wansha were both trying to comfort him. Meanwhile, Zhang Qi, like his son, turned that unease into blame toward me. He blamed me for setting off rashly without figuring anything out first. But now Zhang Qi was the one driving, and before he could pin the problem on me, he was already being scolded by his own son. He looked irritated. How was I supposed to know the road was jammed? Talk properly. This should have been the first conflict between father and son, as far as I remembered, even in the previous life, when the journey was arduous and Zhang Qingan flew into a rage. Zhang Qi never even furrowed his brows once. Unlike how strict he was with his daughter, he had always been lenient with his son. But on the road to survival, suddenly encountering such an accident in the midst of hope is something no one can accept. If this fastest route is blocked, it means we'll have to spend more time getting to the shelter center. If the other routes are also blocked and the vehicle simply can't get through, then there's no way to reach the shelter on foot alone, especially with Zhang Qi still having to drive. The pressure doubles. In my previous life, I bore this kind of pressure alone with no one understanding me. This time, it was Zhang Qi's turn. Zhang Qianan was stunned for a moment, then said in an even fiercer tone than Zhang Qi, I'm not doing it. Li Wansha didn't realize her son was on the verge of breaking down and spoke to her grandson. Enough. Shang Qi say a few less words. Lu Wansha was also displeased that Shang Qi had yelled at her son, muttering, You took the wrong road yourself. Why are you blaming? And then Shang Qi exploded in anger, got out of the car menacingly, yanked open the middle door, and roared at Shang Qianan, Get down here. Shang Qianan knew Shang Qi was his father, and he also understood the reason Shang Qi had married and had children with me over the years. Shang Qi treated him very well out of guilt. He spent my money to satisfy his material desires and used my resources to get him into the best school. Unfortunately, a crooked beam makes crooked rafters. No matter how much Shang Qianan was nurtured, it could not change the fact that he had the same terrible genes as his biological father. Shang Qianan continued to talk back. Who do you think you are? Why should I listen to you? Shang Qi had only acted on impulse at first, but now his son's provocation had completely turned it into fury. He grabbed Shang Qianan by the collar, hoping to intimidate him with force. Shang Qianan was young and hot-tempered and not at all afraid of him. He kicked straight at him. Shang Qianan used all his strength, but Shang Qi was in his prime and ultimately had the upper hand. Though he stumbled, he did not loosen his grip. Instead, he dragged half of Shang Qianan's body out over the side. Seeing this, Lu Wanxia quickly stood up to try to stop them. Shang Qianan vaguely saw a human figure and instinctively swung his arm. Lu Wanxia failed to keep her balance and was shoved hard against the car door. The loud crash successfully halted the escalating conflict here. Lu Wanxia slumped in her seat and only came to her senses after quite a while. I held the startled, awakened Qingqing in my arms and asked with faint concern, Mom, what's wrong? Lu Wanxia tried to prop herself up to sit, but suddenly her face went pale and she cried out. Her right arm was bent at an obvious angle. It was probably fractured. Li Wansha had severe osteoporosis, and the doctor had told her to drink less tea and coffee. But in order to show off her wealth, Li Wansha simply ignored my advice. She loved going to different coffee shops, to check in, posting on moments, and calling on friends to like her posts. Before I died, when Li Wansha had itemized my many crimes in an attempt to make killing me seem justified, she mentioned this. She said I wouldn't let her go to coffee shops because I looked down on her and didn't want her spending my money. There was plenty of such inexplicable resentment. I only then realized that to Li Wansha, all my concern for her was proof that I looked down on her. I gently patted my daughter's hand, which was trembling slightly from excitement. In my plan, Li Wansha was the first person to die, but now it seemed that, without me having to do anything at all, she was going to die. There's a stretch of road ahead that requires using both hands and feet to climb across. She definitely won't be able to get through it like this. Her biological mother had been crying out in pain for a long time before Jiang Qi finally realized something was wrong. Mom, what's wrong? Jiang Qi, I think I've broken a bone. Hurry and take me to the hospital. Jiang Qi remained silent. What are you standing there for? Hurry up. It was my fault for being too obedient before, giving Li Wansha and her son the illusion that he was just as filial. Then, after the prolonged silence, she suddenly realized something, and her already bloodless face turned even paler. Jiang Qi, I can't stand the pain anymore. Likewise, Li Wansha always played the victim in front of me and succeeded every time, which gave her the illusion. She thought it would work on Jiang Qi too. Unfortunately, Jiang Qi was unmoved and didn't even intend to come over to check. He stood outside the car on the other side, frowning, quite displeased with his biological mother's lack of sense. I urged him, honey, what are you waiting for? Hurry and take Mom to the hospital. No, before Jiang Qi could say anything, Fuya blurted out anxiously. Li Wansha looked at her in disbelief. Fine, Fuya, you heartless thing, and after I've always treated you so well. With that, Li Wansha burst into loud tears. Fuya ignored her. When her life was about to be lost, who would still have the mind to waste time on appearances? In the end, they didn't go to the hospital. Jiang Qi followed the navigation onto the national highway not far away. Li Wansha knew she couldn't change anything. So, after wailing for a while, she fell silent and started groaning softly instead. She was truly in pain. In fact, it should have been dealt with a little first, and then she should have been given some painkillers. I don't know whether Jiang Qi and Fuya simply didn't think of that, or whether they just couldn't be bothered to care. Watching her in pain filled me with satisfaction. Suddenly, there was a sudden break, and Li Wansha, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, lurched forward due to inertia. She instinctively tried to brace herself with her hand, including the broken arm. What followed were repeated screams of agony. Qing, whom I had finally coaxed to sleep, was startled awake again. Her uneasy big eyes met mine, and she calmed down. My gaze fell on her small shoulders, and I thought, not enough. The pain Li Wansha suffered was not even 1/10,000 of what my daughter and I endured in my previous life. But I couldn't do something as cruel as they did. However, I could torment them psychologically. Jiang Qi, hurry and see what's wrong with Mom. I held Qing in my arms and sat motionless in the back seat. Jiang Qi was deaf to even his own mother's miserable cries, let alone my words. Without saying a word, he got out of the car, and Fuya in the passenger seat followed right behind him. Jiang Qinan was so annoyed by her whining that he slammed the door and got out of the car as well. I put the story listening headphones on Qing and spoke in a low, eerie voice. Do you regret it? Li Wansha looked twisted with pain and turned her head to ask me, what did you say? Treating ya and Jiang Qinan so well. Do you regret it? Look at you. You've even broken a bone. And they didn't even ask about it. She had been hit where it hurt. You, as my daughter-in-law, won't even take care of me. What right do you have to criticize other people? It was your son who wouldn't let me. You're lying. Li Wansha interrupted me in a fury. You must have said something to him. She was used to shielding her son from responsibility, even when the facts were already painfully obvious. I nodded. Fine, that's what I said. I also told him you're a burden and that he should give you up. Li Wansha looked stunned. She knew everything I said was true. She just refused to admit it and was spouting nonsense. But she hadn't expected me to say it like that. Panic, fear, and disbelief all raced across her ashen face. One mouth opened and closed, but she still never knew what to say. While she was still dazed, I got out of the car with the child in my arms. Ahead of us was the only road left after all our twists and turns that led to the shelter center, but it had been deliberately damaged. Not far away were several large granaries. Perhaps the people nearby were afraid someone would seize the grain, so they deliberately broke the bridge. On both sides there was only a narrow path wide enough for one person. We had reached the place where Li Wansha had been buried. Shang-Ji walked over to my side and said, "We can only walk over. Let Fuya go scout the way first. She's a woman and light. In my previous life, Shang-Ji chose me. I was very scared at the time and didn't dare go over. He snatched Ching away and threatened that if I didn't go scout the way, he would throw the child off the bridge. Only then did I realize that the person sleeping beside me was worse than an animal. Afterward, to prevent him from forcing me to go scout the way again and leaving Ching alone, I told him about the shelter access code. My intention was to threaten Zhangqi, but I never expected it to instead push my daughter and me into hell. This time, however, because I had altered the shelter notice, I became the one Zhangqi had to protect, and the one who was abandoned became Fuya. In my previous life, it was Fuya's idea to use Ching to force me to explore the way. The more fiercely my daughter cried and made a fuss, the higher the corners of her mouth lifted. Even though it was Zhangqi who approached me for money, she hated me to the bone, as if I had stolen Zhangqi from her. This time, it's my turn to watch the show. With my support, Zhangqi had me do the talking. Glad to play the role of such a bad guy, I walked over to Fuya and got straight to the point. Zhangqi wants you to go scout the way. In my previous life, she had said it to me, just like that. I just thought she wanted me to scout the way for her, but she was using Zhangqi's name as a cover. When I went to Zhangqi to confirm it, he sided with Fuya. Fuya's reaction was exactly the same as mine in my previous life. She looked at me as if I were an idiot. Zhangqi said that. How could that be? After saying that, she said loudly to Zhangqi, she said to let me go scout the way. There was a hint of coquettishness in Fuya's tone, as if she wanted Zhangqi to do her justice. Zhangqi hadn't expected me to sell him out like that, and his expression darkened. But things had come to this, so there was no need for him to keep beating around the bush anymore. He said coldly, "Then hurry up and go." Fuya said in disbelief, "What did you say?" I said. Zhangqi said, word by word, "Then hurry up and scout the way." Are you crazy? Fuya never expected Zhangqi to so casually tell her to go die, and for a moment, she couldn't accept it. Do you know someone could die? At this point, Zhangqi stopped pretending. He said coldly, "That's why I need you to scout the way." Fuya finally understood that Zhangqi was serious. She broke down, "I'm not going." While speaking, Fuya subconsciously looked at her own son. Unlike me in my previous life, she was not so helpless. After all, she still had a son who could stand up to Zhangqi. Unfortunately, Zhangqinan, who had long since been spoiled rotten, would never care whether she lived or died. For him, staying alive was what mattered most, and if you want to survive, you can't afford to offend me. In that case, the one to go scout the way would naturally be Fuya. Fuya suddenly realized she had become completely alone and was terrified. I spoke up at the right moment and threatened her. "If you don't go scout the way, then even if we reach the refuge center, I still won't let your son in." Fuya was not the kind of person who would fight desperately for her son, let alone now when her son had just abandoned her. So, she was not intimidated and sneered. "Whether he lives or dies has nothing to do with me. Whoever wants to be with him can be with him. I'm not doing it anyway." I knew threats would not work on Fuya. Saying that on purpose was simply to make her son disappointed in her as well, after she had already been disappointed in him. Zhangqinan, who had been playing games off to the side, finally looked over, showing obvious disgust toward his own mother. At that moment, Li Wansha finally got out of the car, using both her hands and feet. Caught in my peripheral vision, I turned my head to look at her. Following my gaze, Fuya looked over and suddenly shouted, "Let her go." The commotion just now had been a bit too loud, and Li Wansha heard it all clearly. So, when Fuya pointed at her and told her to go, her expression changed drastically. She also knew that if she went like this, she would only drag us down, making her the best choice for probing the way. Shang-Chi, her son's indifference, left Li Wansha with no hope for him. She was nearly in tears. "I'm begging you." "Hey!" I interrupted Li Wansha, crouched down, and looked under the bridge. "No need to test the road. There won't be any danger." Beneath the narrow path that looked as if it could moment, were rows of reinforced steel bars. Because of the angle, it was hard to spot. Then, let's not waste any time. Hurry over. The meteor swarm was discovered 50 years ago, and the shelter center was well stocked with supplies. So, I only packed a backpack and slung it on my back. Then, he used the pre-prepared carrier straps to securely tie his daughter to his chest, planning to go over first. Shang-Chi grabbed me. We should still send someone to scout the way. If I died, he wouldn't be able to get into the shelter center. Fuya just assumed he was worried about me, and her eyes turned red with anger. But after I threatened him, he no longer dared to be as arrogant as before. He could only grind his teeth in anger, but he didn't dare say a word. It's fine, I said to Shang-Chi. I work in engineering, and this kind of structure is very simple. There definitely won't be any problem. Seeing me say that, he relaxed and reminded me, still, you need to be careful. I nodded, lowered my center of gravity, and used both hands and feet to quickly climb across with the child. Counting this time, it's already the third time I've passed through here. In my previous life, I was made to test the path once, then sent back to carry some things, and walked it a second time. The third time, naturally, I was familiar with the route. I stood on this side and waved to the others over there. No problem. Hurry over. Shang-Chi nodded and went to the car to get his personal belongings. Fu Ye opened the trunk and began to cut down on the luggage. The two of them tacitly ignored Li Wancha's pleading eyes. I watched helplessly as her expression turned venomous, planning to use her one last time before she died. You'd better tie yourselves up in pairs. That way, if something happens to one person, the other can still help. My words almost made Li Wancha cry. She thought that, in the end, I had still softened my heart and was saying this for her sake. Unexpectedly, in just a moment, Shang-Chi and Zhang Chainan quickly went up the narrow paths on both sides. Only Fu Ye was left alone, and she still hadn't finished packing her son's things. By the time she reacted, the father and son were already almost across to the other side. I still have things to carry. I can't take you with me. Everyone knew Li Wancha wouldn't make it to the evacuation center, but no one was willing to be the one to pronounce her death. Fu Ye hurriedly slung up her bag and quickened her pace down the narrow path. Li Wancha knew that she was her last hope. At this life-or-death moment, she could no longer care about the pain in her body and rushed toward Fu Ye. My heart pounded like a drum. Li Shuxia was about to die. The first step of revenge was about to be achieved. It was just then that Li Wancha grabbed the hem of Fu Ye's clothes. The second Fu Ye stepped onto the narrow path. Fu Ye tried to break free, but the ground beneath her feet was uneven. She lost her balance and fell. The two of them screamed at the same time. I didn't want my young daughter to see this, so I put on my earbuds, covered her eyes, and walked a little farther away. Then came two even more miserable screams. I didn't make a move, but my breathing still quickened, and cold sweat poured down me. Help! Help! The weak voice was amplified by the echo under the bridge, like a female ghost calling out for souls. I couldn't help turning my head and saw that half of Fuya's body was hanging in midair. If one of my feet hadn't gotten wedged in a hole in the narrow passage, I'm afraid I would have already fallen to my death in the river channel, like Li Wancha. Shang-Chi and Zhang Chainan were standing not far behind me, and they didn't seem to have any intention of helping. If I wanted to stay steady and avoid even the slightest mishap, I had to keep all fours on the narrow passage. But to help Fuya pull her leg free, I would inevitably have to raise my center of gravity, so they didn't dare. For some reason, the backpack that had been slung over her shoulder had hooked around Fuya's neck. She lay on her back, writhing in terror. This was what she deserved for goading Shang-Chi into threatening me with Ching-Ching. Still, this way she definitely wouldn't die. So I pretended to be a good person and shouted out, "There's something around your neck." After shouting it several times, the panicked Fuya finally heard me. She may have thought it was Li Wancha's hand choking her neck, but after realizing it was only the bag strap hanging around her neck, her expression clearly improved. After calming down a little, she eventually made her way to us through her own efforts. "Sis Fu, are you okay?" My feigned concern made the other two seem especially cold. She walked up to Zhang Qi and, with all her strength, slapped him across the face. "Zhang Qi, you're scum." Zhang Qi slapped her back. "You killed my mom, and you still have the nerve to hit me." He showed not the slightest trace of sorrow, using his dead mother as a cover for his own selfishness and self-interest. It was only after being slapped that Fuya turned her face aside and remembered that Li Wancha was dead. Feeling a bit guilty, she turned to beat her own son. "I'm about to die, and you still didn't come save me." Zhang Qianan showed not a trace of guilt. "If you hadn't been dawdling, how would this have happened?" Seeing him like this, Fuya looked dejected. "You heartless bastard. Wasn't I only packing things up for you? I never asked you to pack. In my previous life, I was tormented to death bit by bit." They had spent a long time building themselves up psychologically for what they had done this time. Although we knew Li Wancha could no longer go on with us, abandoning her and watching her die helplessly were still two different things. Everyone's heart was probably being tormented. I was glad to see how listless they looked. I slung my bag over my shoulder and urged them on toward the village ahead. That was the only place we could stop before dark. Of course, we couldn't tell anyone we were heading to the shelter center. When we entered the village, we stuck to the same story. They said they had finally managed to get in touch with family members who had been traveling before the apocalypse and had made the long journey just to bring her home. Zhang Qi and I are married, and Fu Ye is my older sister. At first, they were a little nervous, fearing that without legal constraints, these people would become utterly unhinged. But the village chief welcomed us, warmly and generously promised to give us a car. At last, a bit of light would turn to the eyes of the three of them, holding Qingqing in my arms. I lowered my head to feed her food and did not take part in the conversation. In my previous life, I was just as naive as they were, but that night, we were arranged to sleep on a large heated Kong bed. Zhang Qianan was unwilling and insisted on staying in a separate room. Now that the grandmother who spoiled him is gone, and even his biological mother has grown distant, no one is there to help him smooth things over. Zhang Qianan was very angry, so he curled up in a corner and played games. Zhang Qi soon started snoring, and Fu Ye was also physically and mentally exhausted, falling asleep quickly. I turned to face my daughter and had no intention of sleeping because I knew the village chief would be bringing people over soon. No one knew how much time had passed before a rustling sound came from the courtyard. Zhang Qianan was still awake and heard it, too. So, he planned to go out and take a look. But as soon as he opened the door, the massive crowd startled him, and he instinctively wanted to run. He failed to charge into the crowd, then turned back into the house, opened the window, and jumped out. With a thud, he landed in a small pond behind the house. Zhang Qianan couldn't swim and cried out loudly for help. Fu Ye and Zhang Qi were startled awake, seeing the villagers already rushing in. They screamed repeatedly. As usual, I put headphones on Qing Chong and held her protectively in my arms. The village chief's sullen gaze swept over us, and he let out a cold sneer. "You're going to take shelter, aren't you?" It was the first time the two of them had seen anything like this. The panicked expressions on their faces indirectly confirmed his guess. Zhang Qianan was brought back again, drenched and still covered in algae and foul-smelling trash. The village chief sat in a grand chair, pinching his nose in disgust. "I can let you all go, but one person has to stay. After all, we can't all hide away and leave one person behind to bear our resentment and imbalance." He glanced over each of us again, waiting for us to make a decision. Earlier, there had only been a dim yellow light in the house. Now, the main lights were on, revealing the mottled walls, like dried bloodstains. Even the Kong we slept on seemed to have bloodstains of different shapes. Except for me, they were all terrified senseless, and for a moment didn't know how to react. The village chief had no patience. He took a melon knife and banged it against the wall with loud clangs. "I'll count to 10. If you can't choose, then I'll take it that you all want to die." The bloodstains on the wall were real, and that knife had indeed killed many people. But in the previous life, before the village chief safely sent us away. He said he had killed too many people and was getting tired of it. So, when people passed by later, he would just scare them a bit and let them go, compared with the thrill of a swift, decisive strike. Watching the onlookers' reactions and expressions is even more interesting. So I'm not afraid. I won't die anyway. But they did know that and were trembling like leaves in the wind. 1, 2, 3. Zhang Qi pushed Fuya and said, "Her. She stays. In my previous life, he pushed me instead. He stole my phone and thought he had gotten the passcode. I could be killed to protect myself. I only told him that I had long since deleted the passcode, and that string of numbers existed only in my mind. Later, we were all let go, and the horrifying ordeal my daughter and I went through began. Seeing that Zhang Qi had no sense of responsibility at all, the village chief, just as before, humiliated him. Then he exposed the relationship between him and Fuya in one sentence. Are you the real husband and wife? No. Zhang Qi was very agitated. Don't talk nonsense. The village chief stroked his chin. That's strange. Her son looks a lot like you. With that, he gave me a meaningful look. Could the one who received the evacuation notice be you? It wasn't her. Zhang Qi once again denied it in a way that only made his guilt more obvious. He was afraid the village chief would take their place and go with me to the evacuation center. The village chief laughed. Don't be nervous. We're not here to snatch your spot. There are hundreds of us. What use are your few slots to us? Like we agreed, if none of us can evacuate, then we'll all wait to die together. He said to me again, Girl, you'd better be on your guard. They're the real family here. Don't end up not even knowing how you died. Seeing no emotion on my face, Zhang Qi felt a pang of guilt. Wife, don't listen to his nonsense. If there were anything between Fuya and me, would I still be protecting you and throwing her under the bus? The village chief was clearly just trying to sow discord and talking nonsense. Seeing Zhang Qin say that, he turned a sympathetic look toward Fuya. Well, it looks like between the two of you, he chose you. Fuya had been abandoned several times along the way, and the village chief's words completely broke her down. She thought she was really going to die here, so she simply gave up and said, Shinjiro, you were deceived by Zhang Qin. Actually, before he could finish speaking, Zhang Qianan, taking advantage of the man next to him not paying attention, snatched the knife from his hand and drove it straight into Fuya's chest. Fuya lowered her head and looked at the knife handle in her chest, then looked up in disbelief at her own son. And then, Mom, I'm doing this for your own good, too. I don't want us to leave and leave you here to be bullied by them alone. Zhang Qianan clenched his back teeth as he spoke, stabbing Fuya several more times amid shock. I looked at my daughter, who was still lying on the bed. Good. She was sleeping soundly with no sign of waking up at all. Then I turned my head again and looked at Fuya, who was clutching tightly onto my son's pant leg, though it was outside the plan, and I felt it was letting her off a little too easily. Watching her being stabbed to death by her own son in front of her eyes still gave me some measure of vindication. Zhang Qin looked at Zhang Qianan's frenzied state, then cautiously glanced at me, feeling guilty as he was. He feared I would grow suspicious and no longer want to take him into the shelter. Fuya convulsed for a while, then finally collapsed motionless in a pool of blood. She died with her eyes wide open, staring straight in the direction of Zhang Qin and Zhang Qianan. My heart was a little calmer than when Li Wancha died, though more than anything I felt a sense of regret. I knew Zhang Qianan was a bastard, but I never expected him to be this much of a bastard. Even if Fuya had told me the truth, I might not have believed her. I would only have taken it as her trying to drive a wedge between us before she died and drag Zhang Qin into it. But in order to go to the shelter center, he still killed her without the slightest hesitation. The village head stroked his chin. You kid, I was only trying to scare you, too, and you really went and did it. He continued, sowing discord, and said to me and Zhang Qin, you two need to be careful on the way. He clearly has a violent tendency. As he spoke, he gave the people beside him a meaningful look, and they took out several knives and placed them on the table. Pick a few of these knives to take with you for self-defense. My heart sank. In my previous life, They hadn't given us any knives. The village chief had clearly seen Zhang Chen's insanity and was trying to sow discord in this way. Too many killings is no better than striking at the heart. He spared us, but whether we could ultimately make it to the refuge center was another matter. I made a request. Village chief, do you have any vehicles with a barrier? The road ahead will be much easier. More than half of it is highway, and we can reach the shelter in at most 5 or 6 hours. I need to ensure absolute safety for my daughter and myself. The village chief slapped his thigh and said, yes, and it's even a luxury car. We left that same night. I drove, and Qin Qin sat with me in the front seat. Zhang Chen and Zhang Qin sat quietly in the back row. Since getting into the shelter center still depended on me, they could only behave and listen obediently. However, one had abandoned his mother, and the other had killed his own mother with his own hands. They were both ruthless people, holding the knife they had taken from the village chief. They each leaned against the car door, guarding against one another. Karma came too quickly. I hardly had to lift a finger before 2 of my enemies were dead. Although things didn't go according to plan, it wouldn't affect what I was going to do next. One of them was utterly cold-blooded, the other completely insane. As for the main event I had prepared, I no longer had the slightest hesitation. This father and son, they deserve it. Qin Chen had no idea what was going on and just sat in the passenger seat eating and sleeping and eating, watching the hillside in my line of sight get closer and closer. I was filled with excitement. 2 or 3 kilometers farther ahead is the evacuation center. After confirming that I could enter the shelter center without my actual presence, I was tied up in a shady spot and subjected to several days of inhuman torture. It was there as well that my daughter, who was not yet 3 years old, had her arm brutally cut off. And here, this is the end point of my revenge. The car followed the path and drove all the way to its destination. I put the headphones back on Qin Qin and played the story. Then I opened the small flap on the partition and looked at the silent father and son. Are we there? Qin Qin let out a long sigh of relief. I shook my head. Qin Qin, before we go into the shelter center, I want to ask you a question. Qin Qin still hadn't realized anything, and his tone was casual. Go ahead. In his eyes, I was just an easy-to-fool idiot. He never imagined that just before reaching the shelter center, I would abandon him. If it weren't for the apocalypse, were you planning to kill me? Qin Qin visibly froze, then forced the corners of his lips upward, trying to put on an innocent smile. Wife, what are you talking about? Fu, you already told me. Qin Qin's expression cracked. Qin Qin, standing by, reacted quickly and was about to get out of the car to restrain me. Unfortunately, I'd locked the car doors, so it didn't work. His reaction essentially confirmed what I'd said. Qin Qin gave him a resentful glare, but still refused to do it. Wife, I don't know what Fuya told you, but you have to believe me. I truly love you. Your mom said it, too, when she was in the car with the fracture. She told me while I wasn't paying attention to her. It's impossible, absolutely impossible. Zhang Qi was completely panicked, his eyes darting around as he thought up some way to talk me into it. I watched his flustered appearance calmly. I also know that Zhang Chainan is your son. Look how much you two look alike. Zhang Chainan failed to get out of the car, then suddenly reached through the small window, trying to grab me. I was already on guard and didn't let him get away with it. I can't just stand by and do nothing, either. How about this? Kill Zhang Chainan, and I'll take you to the shelter center. Zhang Qi hadn't expected me to say something so cruel, and his pupils constricted slightly. The next second, Zhang Chainan struck first and plunged a knife straight into Zhang Qi's leg. Zhang Qi let out a scream, and Qing vaguely heard it, turning her head to look back. Luckily, she was so tiny that she couldn't reach the small window at all. I held her little hand and rubbed it. It's okay. Then I slowly and unhurriedly carried her out of the car. The shelter center had already come into view. I slung my backpack on and, holding the child in my arms, walked toward it. Even if Zhang Qi really managed to survive, I wouldn't let him into the shelter center. I would just give him a glimmer of hope. then leave him trapped in the car, waiting in despair for death. If the one who survived was Zhang Chainan, the same would apply, compared with the cruel methods of that father and son pair in my previous life. I have already been very merciful. The cries of agony, one after another, grew softer and softer, and the nightmare that had lingered in my heart gradually faded away. My steps involuntarily grew lighter, and I strode toward the staff member coming to meet me. Also, us. Just after finishing the registration form, a weak voice came from not far behind. Zhang Qi and Zhang Chainan got out of the car, covered in blood. I looked at the damaged partition. It was clear they had no hope of breaking the window, so they chose to find a way into the driver's cab. Qing had already been carried in ahead of me, so I had nothing to be afraid of. I calmly lifted my foot and prepared to go through security. Zhang Qi got anxious and shouted, "We're together." The staff member looked at me questioningly, and I numbly shook my head. I don't know them. At this moment, Zhang Qi, limping forward with all his strength, said to the staff, "My name is Zhang Qi." She put my name down when she filled out the information online. The staff member held up the printed form. "Sorry, sir. This lady originally registered only herself and her child." "That's impossible." Zhang Qi's lips trembled with anger. He was a smart man, so by now he must have realized that from the very beginning. I never intended to take them into the shelter. I had shown him false information in the registration form. "You dirty bitch." He came limping toward me, looking like he wanted to strangle me, but was stopped by security. There were plenty of people desperately trying to get into the shelter center. No one believed him. "Please, go back. Don't force us to use force." Zhang Qi then put on a pitiful expression again. "I'm injured. Could you treat me before I leave?" The staff member looked indifferent. "Sorry, the medical supplies are only for evacuees." "What about him?" "He's more seriously injured than I am. Could you?" Zhang Chainan also had no idea where he was injured. He was covered in blood and couldn't even speak, as if he were about to die. He was stabbed in the lower abdomen with a knife, and the cloth strip on the handle matched exactly the missing strip from Zhang Qi's cuff. The staff member's expression changed slightly. "You beast, just to get into the shelter center. You didn't even, and your own son." "No, I." Only then did Zhang Qi notice that a section of his sleeve had been torn, leaving him speechless and unable to defend himself. Suddenly, he saw that I hadn't gone in yet and was staring at him coldly, and he became excited all at once. It was her. It was her who made me kill my son, saying she would take me into the shelter. It's all her fault. This vicious woman. He couldn't finish what he was going to say, and the security guard knocked him out with a single strike and threw him back into the car. Then he called over a forklift from the engineering crew and forked the car over to the nearby pile of vehicles. Blood was still gushing from Zhang Qi's thigh, and no one knew whether he would wake up. I hoped he was tough enough to pull through, and ideally wake up, feel the passage of life with clear awareness, just like the previous life me. After hearing this story, what do you think? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. I look forward to hearing your voice.